The night hung heavy over the Pacific jungle, a thick and breathless darkness that felt as if the island itself was preparing for judgment. The usual chorus of insects had vanished. The breeze had died. Even the sea, normally crashing endlessly into the rocky shoreline, was strangely quiet, as if the world were pausing, waiting, bracing. B-roll, moonlit jungle, fog drifting between the trees, distant silhouettes. Marines stationed along the defensive line noticed it immediately. Something wasn't right. Veterans who had fought on multiple islands could sense danger before it arrived, and tonight their instincts were screaming. Privates who had been joking an hour earlier were now silent, listening, gripping rifles a little tighter. Far ahead of them, hidden in the black wall of vegetation, another force was also preparing. But unlike the Marines, they moved with fanatical purpose. Colonel Tanahashi Ikeda stood before his regiment, his posture stiff, his expression carved from unshakable pride. Lantern light flickered across his sharp features, casting deep shadows across his cheekbones and eyes. He lifted the tip of his sword and tapped the battlefield map pinned to a wooden board. "These Americans," he said coldly, "are effeminate. They avoid close combat. They lack spirit. Their courage collapses at night." He waited, letting his words sink into the hearts of his officers. "They are cowards, and we will break them in a single strike." Not a single officer dared contradict him, even though some knew the Americans had proven themselves anything but weak. Ikeda was a man consumed by the old Bushido ideal: discipline, sacrifice, absolute obedience. He believed superiority was a birthright, not something earned on the battlefield. The confidence in his voice made even fear seem like insubordination. B-roll, Japanese troops tying hachimaki headbands, tightening bayonets, adjusting equipment. Hundreds of soldiers gathered behind him. Their faces were tense, their breaths shallow. They knew Ikeda's reputation. He had never allowed retreat. He had once executed a lieutenant on the spot for falling back during a firefight. Under this colonel, there was no mercy, not from the enemy, and not from their own commander. Ikeda raised his sword to the sky. "Tonight, we purge this island of American filth. You will advance without hesitation. You will show them the fury of the Emperor's finest warriors." A thunderous cry erupted, "Banzai!" The sound rolled through the jungle like a tidal wave, filled with devotion but also with resignation. Many soldiers knew this assault might be their last. Some whispered prayers. Others kissed the small family photos hidden in their tunics. None dared show fear. The Marines wait in darkness. On the other side of the island, the Marines of the 7th Regiment arranged themselves in a tight defensive perimeter. They sat in muddy foxholes, leaned behind logs, and crouched next to their machine gun nests. Endless hours of fighting across the Pacific had left them hardened, emotionally numb, physically drained, but mentally sharp. A corporal whispered, "Jungle's too quiet." His squad mate muttered back, "That means they're coming." Machine gun teams checked their ammo belts again. Mortar crews adjusted fuses. Riflemen wiped sweat from their palms and steadied their breathing. B-roll, Marines loading belts, checking rifles, scanning the tree line. Nearby, a sergeant crawled between positions, giving final instructions. "Don't fire until you have targets. Keep it tight. Conserve ammo. If they rush, hit 'em hard and fast." He looked at his men, faces smeared with mud, helmets dented from previous battles, eyes reflecting the glow of small covered lights used to check maps. "You boys hold this line. You hear me? We hold." No one argued. No one joked. They all felt it, the heaviness, the tension, the way the jungle seemed to breathe against their skin. Ikeda's final command. Shortly after midnight, Ikeda's regiment assembled for their final movement. The plan was brutally simple: overwhelm the Marines in one massive nighttime shock assault, break their line, and destroy them in close combat before dawn. He walked down the line, touching each soldier's shoulder with his sword. "Do not shame the Emperor. Do not shame your families. Tonight, we become eternal." Many soldiers bowed, though sweat trickled down their faces. Some trembled. None dared step back. At exactly 12:40 a.m., Ikeda gave the signal. The Japanese troops began to move, hundreds of feet brushing across dirt and roots. It started as a faint vibration, soft thumps, synchronized steps, gear shifting quietly. This was it. The night of death had begun. The first sign. At a Marine listening post forward of the main line, 2 scouts crouched low, hearing the faint noise long before they could see anything. One radioed back, "Movement. Big movement. Very big." "How many?" the sergeant asked. The scout swallowed. "Sounds like hundreds." The Marines stiffened. Adrenaline surged through the line. Then, a single scream tore through the darkness. "Banzai." It was followed by an earth-shaking roar. Thousands of voices merged into one monstrous cry. Ikeda had unleashed his regiment. The jungle exploded into chaos. The collision. Machine guns opened fire instantly, spitting blazing arcs of tracer rounds that carved red lines across the night. The first wave of Japanese soldiers ran directly into the kill zone, silhouettes torn apart by bullets, grenades, and mortar blasts. The Marines held steady, their training kicking in. Gunners rotated barrels. Riflemen fired in controlled bursts. Mortars dropped explosive arcs into the dense jungle. B-roll, explosions lighting up treetops, silhouettes charging, shells bursting. The Japanese kept coming, their screams drowning beneath the thunder of gunpowder. Bodies piled on bodies, forming walls of fallen soldiers that others climbed over. Some charged with bayonets raised. Others crawled through mud with grenades. Officers blew whistles, screaming orders, trying desperately to keep formation. But Ikeda's plan was failing. His men were pouring into a slaughterhouse. A night of horror. The battlefield became a nightmare. Marines fought until their arms shook. Machine guns overheated. Sandbags tore apart from impact. Riflemen wiped sweat and blood from their faces, firing into the waves of approaching soldiers. One Marine shouted, "They just don't stop." Another yelled, "Keep firing." A mortar shell landed in a cluster of attackers, sending smoke, fire, and bodies flying. Flames from exploded fuel packs spread across the forest floor, casting horrific shadows of soldiers running, falling, screaming. By 1:30 a.m., Ikeda had already lost hundreds. By 2:20 a.m., entire companies were wiped out. By 3 a.m., the jungle was soaked with blood, and still Ikeda ordered more charges. His arrogance was unbreakable. His pride was deadly. His regiment was dying. Dawn of the Dead. When the sun finally rose, its golden light revealed the full scale of the massacre. Nearly 87% of Ikeda's regiment was gone. The insult the Japanese colonel hurled at the United States Marines did not come from arrogance alone. It came from a deeply rooted belief in the invincibility of the Imperial Army. He had spent years fighting in the jungles of Asia, defeating poorly equipped forces, crushing resistance, and emerging with the reputation of a man who could bend entire battalions by will alone. But what he didn't know, what he could not anticipate, was that he was stepping toward the worst night of his military career. B-roll, slow aerial flyover of thick Pacific jungle, nighttime ambience, lightning flashes illuminating the treetops. The island that could not bleed. The stage was an island the U.S. military had privately nicknamed the Reef of Death. A jagged piece of earth surrounded by razor-sharp coral, swampy interior marshlands, and cliffs that looked like teeth carved into stone. The Japanese colonel, commanding a regiment of hardened troops, believed this terrain made him untouchable. He had memorized every ridge, every gully, every shadow where a machine gun could sit waiting. He told his men, "The Marines are weak, soft, and effeminate. They will break before the first hour." This statement spread quickly, across campfires, in trenches, whispered in bunkers. He wanted his soldiers confident. Instead, he made them overconfident. B-roll, Japanese troops digging bunkers, sharpening bayonets, studying maps by lantern light. The Marines arrive and something feels wrong. On the opposite side of the island, U.S. Marines were landing in the dim glow of late afternoon. Their boots hit the sand with grim determination. Their faces were not soft. They were not effeminate. They were tired, battle-hardened, and carrying memories of previous island battles where friends never came home. Unlike the Japanese colonel, the Marines understood fear. And they used that fear to sharpen themselves. Any Marine officer looked at the terrain and said, "This place is a coffin waiting for a body." Yet they moved forward without hesitation. B-roll. Marines stepping off landing craft, carrying Browning rifles and flamethrowers. Intelligence warnings the colonel ignored. Days before the clash, Japanese scouts had reported something unusual. Marines were moving with extreme precision. Their patrols were avoiding ambushes. They fought quietly, efficiently. They were studying Japanese patterns in detail. One scout ran miles through jungle to bring a message. The Americans don't behave like before. These ones, they hunt. The colonel brushed it aside. He believed Marines lacked the spiritual ferocity of the Japanese warrior. He believed technology made them weak. He believed comfort corrupted them. His reply? Then let them come. They will die tired. Those 4 words would cost him 87% of his regiment. B-roll. Scout kneeling in front of officer, rejected warning, storm clouds gathering. The night before the slaughter. Night fell heavy and suffocating. A tropical storm approached. Thunder rolled like distant artillery. Inside the Japanese colonel's command bunker, officers gathered over a table littered with maps and half-burnt cigarettes. The colonel stood tall, hands clasped behind his back, speaking with absolute faith. The Marines will not attack at night. They lack courage. But somewhere in the jungle, an American squad leader looked at his men and whispered, "Tonight, we become ghosts." The Marines prepared silencers, checked knives, fixed bayonets. They smeared mud on their faces and tightened straps on their helmets. They weren't planning a charge. They weren't planning a frontal assault. They were planning a removal, regiment by regiment, bunker by bunker. And every Marine understood the mission. No survivors. B-roll. Dark silhouettes of Marines moving silently, rain dripping from tree leaves, lightning illuminating faces. The colonel overplans and misplans. The Japanese strategy relied on fixed bunker positions, machine gun nests pointed toward expected landing zones, pre-sighted artillery coordinates, belief that Marines feared night combat. But none of these mattered. Because the Marines were coming from directions the colonel did not believe possible. Because his command structure was rigid. Because his troops were positioned for what he believed would happen, not what the enemy would actually do. A junior Japanese officer, nervous, whispered, "Sir, the Americans fight differently now." The colonel straightened, jaw set like stone. "They are cowards. And cowards don't innovate." This was the sentence spoken just hours before his entire defensive line collapsed. B-roll. Map overlays showing Japanese lines versus Marine infiltration routes. The final mistake, sounding the drums. At 2200 hours, the colonel ordered a ceremonial morale boost. Taiko drums echoed across the jungle, a thunderous boom meant to rally his soldiers and terrify the Marines. But the opposite happened. The drums revealed every Japanese position to the Marines listening in the dark. Every bunker, every trench, every concentration of troops. A Marine radio operator grinned and whispered, "He just gave us the whole island." Coordinates were passed. Teams were assigned. Paths were marked. The colonel's pride had become his enemy. And the Marines were about to turn his confidence into a weapon against him. B-roll. Dark silhouettes of Marines marking coordinates on a map using red pencils. The island holds its breath. By midnight, the wind stopped. The rain paused. Lightning flickered behind thick clouds. The air felt too still, like the jungle itself knew what was coming. Japanese soldiers murmured nervously. Some tightened rifle straps. Some wrote final notes to family members. Some sat silent, trying to steady their heartbeat. The colonel walked through the trenches, chin high, forcing a look of confidence. Inside, he felt something he never admitted. A strange, cold knot in his stomach. But he pushed it away. "We are the Emperor's shield. We do not fear the night." Meanwhile, Marine squads crouched in the shadows just meters away, unseen. Waiting. Watching. Ready. B-roll. Close-ups of Marine eyes in the dark, slow zoom on Japanese soldiers unaware of approaching danger. The stage is set. At 0:31 hours. A single red flare shot into the sky. The colonel looked up confused. A flare he did not order. A flare from the wrong direction. A flare that signaled the beginning of the bloodiest, fastest annihilation his regiment had ever seen. The night that would destroy 87% of his men had begun. You could call it fate. You could call it strategy. You could call it karma. But one thing was certain. His insult about Marines being effeminate and cowardly was about to be erased forever. In blood. The red flare hung in the sky like a bleeding star. For 2 long seconds, the island froze under its haunting glow. Japanese soldiers lifted their heads. Marines tightened their grips. The colonel's heartbeat, for the first time, stumbled. And then, the lights went out. B-roll, red flare descending slowly, jungle silhouette, darkness swallowing everything. The first silent kill. A Japanese sentry blinked, confused, and took 1 step toward the tree line. He never made the second step. From the darkness, a Marine blade swept across his throat, clean, silent, controlled. A hand caught his body gently before it hit the ground. In less than 5 seconds, 2 more guards fell. No gunfire. No shouts. No alarm. Just shadows moving like water, and bodies sinking into the mud. For the colonel's regiment, the night was still calm. For the Marines, the operation had already begun. B-roll, shadows moving behind trees, close-up of knife glint, fallen helmets in mud. The Marines split into hunter teams. The entire American force did not attack as one. They broke into 14 hunter teams of 6 to 8 men, each carrying Thompson SMGs, combat knives, silenced pistols, flamethrowers, demolition charges. They weren't an army. They were a surgical instrument, slicing into the heart of the Japanese defensive line. Team A infiltrated the ridge bunkers. Team B cut communication wires. Team C targeted machine gun nests. Team D prepared the flamethrowers for bunker purification. Each Marine had one mission. Get in, kill fast, move before they know you were there. B-roll, tactical maps overlay with paths, Marines crouching with Thompsons and flamethrower tanks. The first explosion breaks the night. 0:42 hours. A Japanese forward bunker suddenly erupted in a fireball that lit up the tree line. The colonel woke with a jolt as heat washed across the jungle. He rushed outside, shouting, "Artillery strike? Who fired? Who gave the order?" No one answered. The dawn revealed a landscape almost unrecognizable. Where proud Japanese defenses had once stood, there were now smoldering craters, shattered bunkers, and the eerie silence of the dead. Yet amid the devastation, a small and unexpected twist emerged, a twist that would forever complicate the colonel's narrative of arrogance and assumed superiority. Insert visual, pan across the broken defensive lines, bodies strewn among destroyed foxholes and burned-out pillboxes. It wasn't just the staggering 87% casualty rate that shocked observers. It was what remained. Among the ruins, a handful of Japanese soldiers, fewer than 150 out of 1,200, had survived, not because of orders or strategy, but because of intuition, courage, and sheer willpower. They had ignored the colonel's reckless commands, chosen survival over futile resistance, and retreated into the thick jungle that the colonel had dismissed as impassable. Visual. Soldiers slipping silently through dense jungle, camouflage blending with vines and shadows, rain dripping from leaves. These survivors became living contradictions to the colonel's earlier words. He had called the U.S. Marines effeminate and cowardly, but it was now his own soldiers who faced the true test of courage. In the dense tropical undergrowth, away from the flattened bunkers and ruined trenches, these men confronted a night far darker than any battlefield strategy could anticipate. Insert visual. Close-up of a soldier's hands digging a makeshift shelter, another tying leaves for camouflage, a third peering nervously into the mist. The Americans, meanwhile, were not done. They scoured the island with systematic precision, clearing bunkers, cutting through communication lines, and hunting down remaining pockets of resistance. Reports from the Marines later described these survivors as ghosts of a defeated army, yet strangely relentless. Each step through the jungle was a life-or-death gamble. One misstep could mean capture or death.